of course, Saturday, April the 25th, 2025, 6, I should say. So, Lord, bless right now our time together in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, today I'm going to be talking about gratitude. Now, gratitude is also the practice of looking at people in your life and recognizing that you didn't find them by accident. You know, the people that come into our lives are either going to enhance our lives or they're going to be a lesson for our lives. And what you and I need to do today is walk with gratitude and thanksgiving. Now, of course, gratitude is very, very important because gratitude is basically having an attitude of grace and understanding that grace is a product of love. You know, it tells us in Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 to 40, it says, you're to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. What that simply means is when you respond to love, something happens inside. The scars, the pain, the sorrow, the trauma, the abuse that you have suffered at the hands of life in general, and also as well other people begin to slowly change from the inside out. You actually begin to get healed by the love that you are responding to. And what happens is as you begin to heal, as you begin to get whole, you know what happens? You begin to learn to love and trust again. And you make a decision that you're going to risk again in love. Now, I want to tell you something about love. It can take you to the highest heights or to the deepest depths. But you see, when you walk with gratitude and thanksgiving, which is a byproduct of choosing to love, to risk love, to be able to say, you know, I've been hurt, I've been traumatized, I've been abused, I have been misunderstood, I've been slandered against, but I choose not to allow those things to define who I am. I have learned that those things are part of life, but they do not define who I am. I am not a victim. I am a victor. I am not being someone who is being overcome. I am an overcomer. I am not being defeated. I am being undefeated. And I am not going to allow these things to conquer me. I am going to become more than a conqueror. Now, these qualities are, of course, qualities that we choose to have in our lives. We choose to walk in love. We choose to walk in forgiveness. We choose to not only forgive, but we choose to forget because we understand that people can change. It doesn't mean that we may be the agents of change, but we know that people can change. And also, as well, gratitude is looking at the people in your life and recognizing that you did not find them by accident. I want to tell you a little story today from my own life that will explain what I am talking about today. When I was doing radio broadcasting back in the 70s, I went to school and I was getting ready to finish my practicum. And what happened was, all of a sudden, I had a call on my life to leave radio and to pursue a vocation as a clergyman. And so basically, I went off to college. And when I went off to college, I went there in the mid of the year. I went in January. And so I went to school for 4 months. And then I made a decision over the summer that I was going to move to British Columbia to go to school. Well, of course, I was fully intending, I was registered to go to British Columbia to go to school. And it was in the lower mainland in Vancouver. And the reason why I wanted to go was because in the lower mainland, it is usually beautiful weather all year round. And I was looking for beautiful weather. I was tired of living in Alberta where, the weather could change in a minute. Let me explain this weather situation. Monday of this particular week, we were looking at, 21 degrees Celsius or about, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. It was 2 beautiful days. And then on Wednesday, all of a sudden, the weather changed. And by Thursday and yesterday, we found ourselves in blizzard conditions. Now, this morning, I go look out and the weather is warming up and we're going to see beautiful weather again. So we saw a winter storm at the end of April. Well, I was tired of that. So I had announced to all my friends that I was moving to British Columbia. I was going to go to school to British Columbia. Well, during that summer, my good friend George came to me and he says, I do not have a roommate. I want you to be my roommate. I said, no, George, I am going to British Columbia. And so I was fully determined. But he said, well, why don't you come to Edmonton and help me find an apartment? So as I was going around, I helped George find an apartment. But he said, I can't afford it. He says, would you please be my roommate? And I heard myself say, all right, I'll stay one more year at the college of which I was staying. Now, what happened was, of course, little known to me, there was a young lady who was living in Three Hills, Alberta, who was planning to go to the University of Alberta. She had been accepted into the University of Alberta. Her plan was to become a medical doctor. Now, what happened was two missionaries from the north who were good friends of her mother and father came and said to her, you should head off to college and study theology. And so she said, no, I'm not going to do that. They said, all you have to do is do one semester. Just take one semester and then head off to the University of Alberta. They even paid her registration fee. Well, she made a decision that she was going to go off to college and take one semester. I was planning to only be at that college for one more year. So on the morning of what they would call orientation, my friend George and I decided that we were going to greet all the girls in the new school and in the school. So I walked around and unknown to me, I actually shook her hand twice. Now, what happened was, of course, the first day of class, I made a decision that I was going to sit on the other side of the class. Right up to that year, the boys would sit on one side and the girls would sit on the other side. Well, I sat down and another fellow whose name was Greg Johnson sat down in beside me. And then on the other side, this young lady and her friend sat in front and beside me. And she looked at me and I looked at her and I didn't think anything of it. But God spoke to her and said, that's the man you're going to marry. She said, oh no, not him. I didn't come here to get married. I came to study for 4 months and then, of course, go off to be to my medical career. Well, that's not exactly what happened. Very shortly, we developed a friendship. And then about 4 months later, we started dating, and we've been dating ever since. And that was not a coincidence. That was a divine appointment because neither one of us had intended to, be where we are. But so often divine providence has a wonderful way of bringing people together, and also as well forming friendships that would have never happened any other way. Years ago, I listened to a Christian comedian whose name was Mike Warnke, and I never dreamed that Mike and I would become the best of friends. But when I was living in the Northwest Territories, we were having a spring event called, of course, Northern Harvest. And they were saying, who should we come to have Northern Harvest? Now, I had met Mike briefly when I was pastoring in Slave Lake. I said, let me contact Mike Warnke. And I was able to get a hold of Mike Warnke. And Mike said, sure, I'll come up to the Northwest Territories. I've never been there. Mike came up and we became the best of friends. And I never realized that when I was listening to his records and tapes and seeing him in person as a young person, that we would become the closest of friends. And Mike actually came up to the Northwest Territories not twice, but 3 times, and was a real blessing, not only to the people of Hay River, but also of Yellowknife and other communities in the north. It started a lifelong friendship. And you never know who's going to come into your life or what the circumstances are going to, make it happen. But also remember, when you have these good friends, embrace them and be thankful that you do have them in your life. Also, as well, I want to share a story today about a young man whose name was Ryan. Now, Ryan at the time was about 6 years old. That's right, he was 6 years old. And he heard that there were villages in Africa that did not have wells or running water. He was absolutely shocked. He was a 6-year-old boy from Toronto, Canada. And he had heard this presentation by an organization that did actually drill wells. And they said, just for $70, you can be a partner in, of course, drilling wells in Africa. Ryan thought, of course, that it was going to take $70 to drill a well. So he goes home to his mom and says, Mom, can I borrow $70 to be able to, partner with this organization in here in Canada that drills wells for, of course, villages in Africa? And his mother said, well, no. But what I can do is you can do a bunch of chores, and over the next few weeks, you can earn $70. Well, Ryan went right after it. He did all these household chores, and within a month, he had $70. So he heads down to the headquarters of this particular organization with his $70. And he says, here's my $70. Let's drill a well in Africa. Well, they said, actually, it costs $2,000 to be able to drill a well in Africa. When we came to your school, we were looking for sponsors, and each sponsor would, of course, give $70. Ryan said, you know what? I am going to go and earn $2,000 to drill my own well in, of course, Africa. He said, what's the name of the village of your next project? They gave him the name of the village, and Ryan went and earned $2,000. He did all kinds of mowing of lawns, and it was his total focus. Finally, after about 3 or 4 months, he came back and he said, is that village, does it have a well yet? They said, no, we're still waiting for funds. He handed them $2,000. They said, my goodness, where did you get that from? He said, I worked for it. And he gave $2,000, and the well project organization drilled a well in that community. Ryan, of course, was only, 7 years old at the time because he turned from 6 to 7. And he was so motivated that he said, you know what? I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to help people in this manner. Well, when I had the privilege of being able to meet this young man and also as well interview this young man when I was working for AM 930 The Light, it was an absolute delight. By the time I met Brian, he had been responsible for doing wells. He had an organization called Ryan's Well Project. And at the time, he was in his early 20s. And by that time, he had already been sponsoring hundreds of wells in Africa. He had personally been able to, not only earn money, but inspire other people to be able to give to his wonderful project. 100% of the money went to drilling wells in Africa. And it was absolutely wonderful. Now, the part of the story that is so wonderful is that Ryan, after this project had been completed, and the people asked, who is responsible for this? They said, a young man in Canada. And so he had the privilege of being able to travel to Africa and to go to the village where he first was able to sponsor and have the well drilled. When he arrived in the village, everybody knew his name. In fact, everybody within 100 kilometers knew his name because that well was the first working prototype of well of that kind that had been seen in that part of Africa. Up to that point, people had to go down to a local watering hole, which was, of course, not only used by the people, but also by animals. This was the first time that they had crystal clear water, and it was available to everyone within a certain area. He was a local hero. What the people were walking with gratitude. They were thankful for the people that Ryan had come into their life. He had changed the life of an area, and he has gone on to, of course, change the lives of literally hundreds, thousands of people by drilling wells in Africa. An amazing, amazing story. You and I can make such a difference by choosing to, do what it is that we are called to do. Ryan has said, because of that one presentation in his school, his life has been absolutely changed. And he has been able to change the lives of literally thousands of people by simply, being an individual who is able, through his organization, to drill wells in Africa to bring clear water to the people of that area. Something larger is happening when we actually, touch certain people in our orbit. You and I can choose every day to make a difference. You may not be a Ryan. You may not be, some big entrepreneur. You may not be a Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett who can give literally billions of dollars to help people. But your small act of kindness could change someone's life. I love telling this story. There's a man who lives in a major city in in China. And in this city, the Yangtze River, which is one of the most, actually, it is the longest and most powerful river in that part of Asia. It often has cliffs that are literally cut through the by the river. And in this particular city, there is a bridge over the city, and the city sits on two sides of the Yangtze River, and there's a deep gorge that goes up in that part of the city. And they built a bridge over that river, and it became infamous for people who were totally depressed to jump off of that river, jump off the bridge into the river. Now, what happened was he was walking across the bridge, and one of those local jumpers were getting ready. He immediately ran up and grabbed that person and was able to actually talk them down. And over the next 3 years, he made it his life mission to be able to talk people who felt that they had no option but suicide. He's been able to talk more than 500 people out of committing suicide. But more importantly, he began an organization, a counseling organization in that community to be able to help these people who felt that they had no other recourse but to jump off the bridge to help rebuild their lives. That one act of kindness led to a man who is known throughout that city, not only as the person who talks people out of committing suicide, but helps them put their life back in order. One act could actually change the direction and the trajectory of your life. You never know. Your one act of kindness could actually change someone's direction of their life. That's why you and I should be looking for opportunities to be able to show kindness and love and grace and forgiveness to others. You know, it was Jesus who said this, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, which basically means no matter how you treat me, I am going to treat you the way that I would want to be treated. And that is so important today. We live in a world where there is chaos and confusion, where it seems that, disorder is the order of the day. And that's why people need today individuals who are stable, people who are reliable, people who are honest, individuals who walk in love and kindness. That should become the mode and the fashion of the day, especially in the times in which we live. And you and I can have an opportunity to do that every day. You can get up this morning and say, you know what? I'm going to be available. It doesn't mean that every single day you're going to be able to change someone's trajectory, but you never know. And I want to remind you that there's a little statement that goes along this way. People may not always remember what you said, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel. And that is so very, very important today, because we're living in a world where people more and more seem to be becoming self-centered and self-driven. And that can be very, very harmful when we're looking out for number one. There was an old song that says, looking out for number one. Don't do that today. Instead, be looking for opportunities to be able to touch people in your life. And remember, coincidence is not the word. Providence is the word. I remember watching a movie this week, which is called Persuasion. It's based on a story written by Jane Austen. And there's this one particular situation where the heroine of the movie, she meets a relative, and they are able to meet again. And he says, it must be Providence that we are throwing together. And basically what he was acknowledging, and what Jane Austen was acknowledging, that the people that come into our lives are not coincidence, but they are providence, and that these connections can make such a difference in our lives as we interact with them and they interact with us. There are actually people out there that bring out the best in us, not always the worst of us, but the best of us. I have a friend whose name is Roger, and Roger is always trying to bring out the best in people. I met a man whose name was Gene, and this was a very interesting experiment. Gene had come to visit our family and family members in the city of Kelowna. My wife's mom and dad were alive at that time. And I watched Gene go from person to person during that visit and listen and encourage. And I saw in front of me a practical demonstration of an individual who purposely went and wanted to encourage people around him. And as I watched him, I said, you know what? I want to be a Gene. I want to be an individual who, when I am in a setting, go from person to person and to encourage them and to build them up. There are people like that. Yes, I know that there are other types of people that, you're glad they left, not glad that they came. Don't be that person. Be the person that people are very glad to see. When Ryan, that young man that I was talking about, went back to that African village, the people knew who he was. And they actually held a celebration in the town for this young boy who had basically was the backer of drilling the well in that particular community. You see, the connections that we make, we need to treasure because we need to recognize it's not random. They are in our lives for a reason. Some people, of course, are a blessing. Other people are a lesson. But instantly, we need to recognize that they're carefully orchestrated, that these meetings that can change the trajectory of our story. Every one of us right now are writing a story. Every one of us are building a life. And how you build that life is, of course, the choices that you make every single day. The decisions that you make. You can be a crank. You can be a critic. You can be a curmudgeon, or many of these other words, or you can choose to be a blessing. You can choose to be an encourager. You can choose to be an exhorter. You can choose to build people up. You can choose today to be a blessing. That's the choice that you and I can make. And you know what? It only takes a moment to make that decision. You can get mad at somebody because they're ticking you off. You can, send that zinger that will cut that person right off. Or you can choose kindness. You can choose love. You can choose forgiveness. You can choose, of course, to be, a blessing. There's an old song that simply says, "Make me a blessing today." And in that song, the writer basically says, you know what? I am making a decision today to be a blessing. I am choosing today to bring glory to the Lord. And I am choosing today to change the trajectory of someone's life. It was Solomon who wrote this. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pitchers of silver. He was basically saying the right thing at the right time, in the right manner, to the right person can make all the difference in the world. I remember back years ago, there was a cartoon called Tumbleweeds. It was basically a cartoon that was looking at the life of cowboys in the early American West. So this cowboy comes up to this antelope and this deer, And he says, man, oh man, you two are the weirdest looking animals I've ever seen. And for the next two pages or the next two panels, he was telling them how crazy and how stupid they looked. And then he rode off. And the deer says to the antelope, I think we just heard our first discouraging word. Well, it was a humorous portrayal of how our words can either elevate someone or tear them down. You and I can make such a difference by giving somebody an encouraging word, telling someone that you appreciate them. Tell them that, you like a particular quality of them. One man said simply this. He says, every day when I meet people, I always try to compliment them on something that they're either wearing or they have done. And he says, it's amazing when I do that, a frown instantly turns into a smile. He says, I am helping people become energy efficient. You see, it takes less muscles to make a smile than it does a frown. So maybe today, by complimenting and also encouraging people, you are helping them reduce their carbon footprint. Think about that thought. The simple thing is that you and I, when we walk with gratitude, when we walk with thanksgiving, and we recognize that the people in our lives don't happen by accident, but by providence. That coincidence just didn't bring people into our urban. That the people that we meet actually have a purpose. And we simply say, I want to be available for that purpose. And that these meetings that we have that seem so random are actually being divinely choreographed and orchestrated. Because what we can do is change the trajectory and the direction of someone's life by our simple act of kindness. And when we do that, you know what happens? People begin to do the same to us. It was Paul who said in Galatians 6:8, he said, whatever you sow, you are going to reap. So if you sow kindness, kindness comes back to you. You sow love, love comes back to you. You show grace, guess what? Grace comes back to you. You begin to attract the type of people that you are. Yes, that's right. You begin to see people coming into life that are similar to you and have the same ideas. You see, I talked about that young man whose name was Ryan. Ryan, of course, not only continued on supplying wells in Africa, but he gathered a group of people around him. When he would speak to people about his passion, people would say, I want to be a part of that. And other people began to as well say, you know what? I'm going to give you the whole amount because I want to do what you do. And Ryan has been able to touch so many lives by telling them his story and how that he, as a young boy, made a decision that no matter how hard it was, he was going to give that village in Africa a well where they could have clean, clear water, that they didn't have to share their water with animals who were drinking from the same river or from the same pond. He said, I am going to have a well dug, and that well is going to supply fresh water to that village. And he's been able to do that with hundreds of villages, and many thousands of people have joined his organization, have sponsored his organization. He said when he was a little bit older, I never dreamed that this would become my life profession and my love obsession. All it takes is one act of kindness, and it can change the trajectory and the life of somebody. Remember, people may not always remember what you said or even what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So, Father, I thank you today for the wonderful opportunity of gratitude and thanksgiving. It's more than just a day on the calendar. And it's more than just a momentary feeling of peace and thankfulness. It's an attitude. It's a trajectory. It's a decision. And I pray today that we will make that our decision. Well, if you like what you've been hearing and seeing, of course, I always encourage you to press the like button. And I want to thank everyone who has been also a subscriber to my channel. You have made it such a blessing. So if you like what you're hearing and seeing, you can, of course, press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, as well, would you also check out my daily YouTube shorts? I've been doing quite a few lately, and I really enjoy spending time doing these YouTube shorts. Yes, I do enjoy doing these longer presentations that I have been doing with you, but I also enjoy doing those YouTube shorts. They're usually under 1 minute and they have one thought, but that thought could literally bless you and also as well give you some well needed advice. So check out my YouTube shorts as well. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, practice gratitude and be thankful for every person in your life, especially those who encourage you, those who keep you accountable, people who speak blessing into your life and also truth into your life, because we need people like that in our lives as well. And you do that as well. Be a blessing and speak the truth in love. That could make such a difference in someone's life today. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for joining me. Have yourself a great and godly day.